So today we're back on the 60 MGA. We're going to work on the windshield and put the rear bumper on. Let's go. Well, we're getting ready to put the windshield on now. So I slide these down in there and put the bolts through, but don't tighten anything. Leave them to where they can move a little bit. Of course, this one doesn't want to move because it's pretty tight in there. But don't tighten anything. Actually, I'm not even sure I really want these on there now, but we got them loose in there anyway. So then on the windshield frame, there's actually these little holes that go through the slot for the screws. You can just enter the seal through one of those holes and slide it all the way through. Use plenty of lubricant on it. I use WD-40 myself. So in this case, he had two windshield frames, and what we're doing is we're using this one here, which is not perfect by any means, but he's going to end up at some point sending the other one out to be re-chromed, and then we'll put some new glass in that one and replace the windshield somewhere down the line. But for now, we're putting this one on, as this glass has no cracks in it, and the chrome cleans up well enough that looks okay from 10 feet. But we do have to worry about the screw holes here. There's tapped plates inside of here, and like we got one here, I'm gonna have to drill that one out. This is gonna be a delicate process because you can't drill too far and hit the glass or you'll crack the glass. And then you got to use a bottoming tap on that. So now, since we can't get screws right now because they're back ordered and months out, we're playing around with some stainless stuff and some screws that are actually for other applications to try to come up with something that's going to put all this together for now. And then when we do the other windshield frame, we can actually replace the tapping plate and get the other screws because we'll have them by then. So in this case, what we're going to end up doing is just chasing these threads all out with 1032, because that is close enough to the original threads to make it all work. And we have 1032 screws in chrome that we can use. The problem is, though, I don't have a bottoming tap in 1032, and he ordered a bottoming tap on the internet, and this is what showed up, and it is anything but a bottoming tap, which leaves us in a slight pickle to get this together. What we're going to try to do is grind a little bit off the tip and see if I can chase the threads enough to make it all work without having to go find another tap. So what I ended up doing was I ground off the end of this thing to where there's just barely a little bit of the starting ramp of the threads there. I chased it initially with one of my taps, which actually technically I guess is a bottoming tap, but chased it with this, then come back in with this just to make sure it's all good. Now you have to be very careful how deep you go in here, because you will hit the glass, and if you hit the glass and go just a hair too far, you will crack the glass right out. So you gotta be very careful, and it's not that deep. You're only going in, you know, that far, because it's just going through this frame into a piece of the tapping plate, and then you're into the rubber seal. So you're not going very deep at all. And with the screws, if like in this case you don't have the correct screws, you really have to be careful with the length of the screws you're putting back in here. Like we're just doing the 1032 chrome screws, which isn't quite the right thing, but we'll have to, once you set it in there, run the screw in there and you know, feel it, and be very careful to listen and feel, and make sure we're not bottoming out and actually putting too much pressure on the rubber seal and putting pressure on the glass. Or we got to grind the screws a little bit shorter so that it doesn't do that. Now, both sides, the bottom screw is broken, which means I got to drill them out and tap them from scratch. Yay for me. Well, I have now successfully drilled out the broken screws and got everything tapped all the way across. No problem. But after doing some careful measuring to find out how long our screws actually need to be going through there, these screws that I had here that I thought would work aren't going to work because they're just barely going to pick up 1 or 2 threads. These are 5/8 long. It looks like what we are going to need is about 3/4 to 7/8 range. So the owner of the car is heading off to the hardware store to see if he can find some stainless screws to work. So meanwhile, I'm going to look at the rear bumper, license plate light and mount. So this is the license plate mounting bracket, and then the light mounting bracket and light. I've got them just loosely screwed together right now. See, this adjusts for height. Once we get a license plate on there, we'll do the final adjustment on height to get it close to the top of the plate. And then this just bolts through here. And then when you wire it, we got to poke a hole here to get the wires in, which requires taking the whole light apart, taking this screw out and taking the lens and cover off. So an assembly of the rear bumper, one thing I did first was I checked the bars here and put it in here and made sure that they weren't too flat, that they have enough, there's enough room in here to be able to get your fingers in here to get a nut on and get a wrench in there once you go to try to put it on the car. These were actually a little too flat initially. And then you also want them to look pretty level when you're looking down through here. And you want them both be the same. So I tweaked them slightly in the vise to get them where I wanted them. So then the order of assembly here, you got this little thick washer, little small diameter thick washer that goes on the studs. Then you drop these on. And then you got there's a stick spacer that goes on here. And then we put a washer. Oops, that's the right washer? Yeah. These washers here. And you have this little rubber insulator with a sleeve in the middle. You drop on, which I'm not going to do this one at the moment, but and then this goes on here, and then you put another one of those rubber insulators on, which we don't have the right ones, but we got these from the hardware store, which will work. So we put those on there too. Another washer, lock, and a nut. And the thicker side, the thicker flange goes up, so this has to go up that way. And it's basically the same thing on this end. You're just putting, but you're just putting a washer, lock, and nut, and that's it. And then you should check with a measurement, make sure that the width of these is about the same as the dumb irons on the back of the car so that they'll fit over that. And then tighten everything down so this looks nice and straight. Everything looks straight. And then we can go put it in the car. So the idea behind these rubber insulators is so that this isn't actually, rigidly mounted, to reduce the vibration a little bit. So this can actually move slightly. Of course, I don't have it fully tightened at the moment, but this can actually have slight movement to help reduce the vibration on the light assembly and give it a little bit of flex, so somebody were to bump it or if you bump it or something, you're not going to break the light so easily. So as far as installing the bumper on the car, it's fairly basic and simple, at least in talking about it. You gotta make sure you put the rubber seals on here first. Now, a lot of times I find that these things stick out a little too far. I end up trimming the edges off of them a little bit so I'm not fighting them to get everything stacked and get a nut on there. So you got a big washer goes on here. Then the bumper goes up on here. Then you got to reach from underneath to put another washer on, then the lock washer, then the nut, which can be a bit difficult to do because there isn't that much space here to get up in there. And you don't want to keep pushing this out any further because you don't really want this iron to stick out beyond the top lip, because that just doesn't look quite so good. It pushes the bumper out too far. In our case, the bumper was sitting a little too close to the paintwork because those were too flat and you couldn't reach in there. That's why I rebent all those, bring it out a little bit. Of course, the further you bring it out, the easier this is, but the further you bring it out, then you see those irons sticking out beyond here, and then it starts looking like it's too far away. So there's a happy medium there to get it to look right. So as far as wiring this, it's pretty simple. You still got the brass connectors just like on the tail lights. You got the red wire goes to the one on the bottom here, and then the black wire is the ground that goes to here, and then that should be it. Just make sure when you do it that you're tucking the wires inside so they're not going to be touching the lamps or get underneath the glass when you put the cover back on. So now we've got the bumper all bolted in place. And see, like I said here, you don't really want that sticking out any further than that. So like I said, about that happy medium, getting enough gap in there to be able to work, yet but not see the iron sticking out from behind the bumper. Get it nice and even all the way across, and try to get the same gap on this end as on this end. And then we got the light all in place here. It's working like it's supposed to. It still needs final adjusted to the license plate once we get a license plate on. But there's the back of the car all together.